when you go to that party and you feel like everyone is looking at you and you're under a spotlight, just know that everyone else at that party feels like everyone is looking at them and that they're in a spotlight. And they're so wrapped up in their own stuff that they're not noticing you. They're not paying attention.
Hi, welcome to the ADHD Social Playbook podcast. I'm Caroline Maguire, your host. Before we get into it, this is part 2 of my conversation with ADHD expert Brendan Mahan. So if you didn't watch part 1 yet, go back and start with part 1. In part 2, we talk about people pleasing and the idea that some people pleasing isn't bad. I know, you're wondering what I'm talking about. There is people pleasing that's detrimental to your health and well-being, and then there's people pleasing that I would call adapting or reading the room. Brendan talks about the different forms of people pleasing, and I think it's going to be a really rich conversation. Let's get into it. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did.
Rail in favor of people pleasing. Like, I'm a fan of people pleasing. I think people pleasing gets a bad rep.
Okay, you have to define this now.
I'm about to.
Okay.
Because I'm totally a people pleaser. And it works for me. And I think it's because of where it comes from. If people pleasing is coming from a place of vulnerability and feeling inferior and just trying to get acceptance by people pleasing, that doesn't work. It's not going to work out because you're going to overcompensate. You're almost kind of lying to people potentially about what you can do or what you're willing to do or what you're comfortable with. And if you're giving up your boundaries and things to try to fit in, then you're not being honest with yourself and other people. And that isn't good. That's like toxic people pleasing. And I'm not a fan of. But like, if you're just being nice to people and cooperative and supporting others and being pro-social, that's fine. That's not a bad thing. And it drives me bananas. This is the same kind of narcissistic nonsense, right? It's the same kind of like, that works good on defense, but it doesn't work good on offense, right? Same idea. If this is coming from a healthy place, cool, right? Like, the two of us are trying to fit our friends into our books as best we can, because we love them and care about them and think that they're brilliant, and we just want people to know that they exist and how smart they are. And we want them to have their name in a book and be like, this is dope. My name's in a book. Like, that makes me feel good. That's pleasing people. That's what that is, right? When I go upstairs and wash the dishes because I know it'll make my wife happy, that's people pleasing. When I take my kids to go do something, that's people pleasing. It's just being pro-social. But it's not coming from a place of inadequacy or desperation, so it's fine. And no one is splitting that hair, at least that I hear. It drives me crazy. Everyone just is like, people pleasing is terrible. And I'm like, at least 75% of it is fine.
Well, I call it adapting, right? Like, so I feel like it's just adapting. It's seeing a need and not doing it from a place of insecurity, but doing it a place of adapting. And, like I said, sometimes it's not my day. Sometimes it's to me about reading the room, right? Like, and it's about being proactive, right? Like, if someone went right now while we're recording and unloaded the dishwasher, which is very full and very clean, I would be like, wow, thank you so much. So that's a great analogy. But I think part of what happens too is there's this hard line people take. And I think it's because the internet perpetuates the hard line along with black and white thinking. And the hard line is, I was asked to mask, I was asked to camouflage, and now I will never ever do it. Except the problem with that is we all have to read the room sometimes and adapt to people and adapt to their needs. And to your main character thing, today is maybe not my day. If it is something that's really important, then I will say, and I've said this to you, like we've had times at the conference where I've been like, I need your help. But there's times when I'm reading the room and I'm realizing that someone else is in distress, or they have a need, or they have a celebration, Or, you know, you and I were on a panel the other night, and sometimes the question wasn't really meant for me. So
Hmm.
I held back and I didn't answer. And I think sometimes, what you're talking about is like it's it's people pleasing when it's insecure, but it's more reading the room when it's looking at the situation and adapting and saying, this will allow me to have a cooperative, cohesive relationship with people.
Hmm. It's just on its face, people pleasing, those two words together just means making people happy, right? Like that's all it means. And people pleasing means like toxic people pleasing or pleasing others to your own detriment or stuff like that's that's the subtext that doesn't get spoken about on social media and the places where this most often comes up because it requires more nuance to go into that depth that we just went into, right? It requires a long form format like a podcast or a book or an article or something, right? And
Right.
so on social media, there's all sorts of, well, people pleasing is bad and you shouldn't people please. And then you mix that in with like, if someone isn't adding to my life, I'm going to cut them out of my life. And also rejection sensitivity and all of these things, you're really shrinking your world and you're shrinking what you're willing to put up with, even though most of that stuff isn't bad. Most of that, like, there's a lot of stuff that's healthy in that circle that we just need to be willing to work to make the judgment call of like, am I willing to deal with this or not deal with this? Is this actually to my detriment or is it just a minor inconvenience that I'm like doing stuff, right? Because there's certainly times when I don't want to do things, but I do it anyway. My kid needs help with an essay because he's just got writer's block. He's a great writer, but he's so in his head about this essay, he needs my help. So I'm going to help him. I don't want to. I'm not like, yes, I get to help my 16-year-old kid write an essay while I'm writing a book. Like I have other things I could use that time for, but he's my son and I love him and I'm just going to help him, whatever. Like it's not a big deal. But I've heard plenty of speeches where people sound like they would not help that kid if it was theirs or not, right? Like, and I'm just it's like a pet peeve. It's one of my, uh. And it also matters for hosting, right? It goes back to that question about how do you host? Well, if you're going to be a host, you're trying to please people. Like that's the deal, right? And that may come from a place of vulnerability. Like you might be inviting people over because you're desperate to have friends come over, and I've certainly done that, or it might come from a place of strength. And hopefully, if it's coming from a place of vulnerability, you're able to ride those feelings of inadequacy and like loneliness and not having friends like I felt certainly into a place where like no 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 we're good now, right? Like now I can have people come over and my house doesn't have to be spotless because like they've been around for a decade and they know, right? I've been to their houses where there's some stuff on the floor. They've been to my house where there's stuff on the floor. It's not a big deal. But I'm also willing to take those extra steps, right? We have a friend whose kid is allergic to peanuts. So when I bake like cookies or whatever, I go out of my way to make sure that the flour that I'm baking with is nut free because that's how you should do it, right? If we've got allergy or dietary limitations, I make the effort to figure out how to accommodate that. I made a vegan chili one year on the 4th of July because I got a buddy who's vegan. We have, for a while there, pre COVID, we had a bunch of kids we hung out with that were all dyslexic like because of who I am. Like I think neurodiverse people just draw neurodiverse people to each other to themselves. I think
Oh,
that's a piece of
a
it.
hundred,
But
a hundred
yeah,
percent.
but also like they were all willing to talk about their kids with me because I'm so obvious and public about what it is that I do and who I am. So I'm like, there's like 3 or 4 kids in this friend group that all have dyslexia. And also, those are the 3 or 4 kids who typically aren't playing board games when we're doing stuff. And I was like, that's because there's a lot of reading involved. So I went through my board game collection and figured out all the ones that would work for dyslexic kids and separated them out so that when those kids came over, it would be easier for them to include themselves or be included by others. Because that's the whole purpose of people coming over is let's all be included. That's me going the extra mile, but it wasn't coming from a place of like desperation or anything. It was just who I am as a person and having the thought and used to be a teacher and all those kinds of things. But it's still people pleasing.
You're talking about two things too. grace, giving people a little bit of grace, and giving people forgiveness,
Hmm.
right? And one of the things I often think is that I want a little leeway and a little forgiveness, right? I just texted a friend who I was supposed to set up a girls' night like your wife did. Haven't set it up. It's now well into spring, right? So I want some grace from them and I want a little bit of forgiveness, right? That means I want to give that as well. And so part of this more positive people pleasing that you're rolling out here is also this idea of like, if I want a little leeway and a little forgiveness, I give other people that. And then I don't hardline their story and have as much black and white thinking. And I think, what else could it be? Right? What else could be going on for them? And I depersonalize things. And I always kind of figure like, if I've done something and you're kind of mad at me, like you should come forward and tell me, because otherwise I'm not playing this game of like, oh, they might be or whatever. And I try to teach my kids this too. Like when they bring stuff up, I'm like, listen, if someone has a problem, they need to talk to you. If they don't, then you need to not create that story. And I think like some of what you're doing is you're hosting and you're being gracious, and then some of what you're doing is also you're giving people some leeway, which we as neurodivergent people want, right? So we got to give it.
Yeah, yeah. It in my way, I think of it as like giving people permission, right? Like you're allowed to kind of be who you are and be where you are and be feeling how you're feeling. And if I can help with that and provide some comfort or some engagement or distraction, then I want to do that. And if that isn't going to work, that's okay too, right? Like if you can't come over because you're a mess, that's fine. Like I've movies in the backyard are a great example. I've got a buddy who, for whatever reason, mosquitoes love him. And when he gets bit, he gets like welts. Like it's a no joke experience. They love him and he's super allergic. And so, do we get our yard sprayed for mosquitoes every year? Yeah, because I want him to come over. But if he's not feeling it, he's not going to just is not up for the risk of getting eaten alive by mosquitoes, or if we're 20 minutes into the movie and the mosquitoes are starting to come out and he gets up and leaves, no harm, no foul, dude. I get it. You're getting eaten alive. That's you're allowed to bounce. He's come over in pretty much a beekeeper outfit in the past because he gets wrecked so hard, and like it's cool, man.
I think some of this too is like um, when my daughter was little and something would go on. I never forget one time we were at a pond and she was swimming and somebody said something was going on with the kids and I said, Lucy, what's going on? And she turned to me and she said, don't assume, don't assume, don't assume something's going wrong, right? And I think like sometimes when someone gets up like that and they leave the movie, we again go back to that story and we make this assumption that like stuff's going on. And then you hear through the grapevine or you talk to them and they're like, no, like mosquitoes love me, I was being eaten alive and I couldn't take it, and I have X on Monday morning and I can't be covered in welts and I can't not be able to wear a suit or whatever. And I think like that goes back to, if you host, you get the opportunity to be social, but if you create the story, it
Hmm.
takes away that opportunity.
Yeah, what's the story you're telling yourself, right? And does it serve you or does it hurt you? I, this is forever ago, but I had a client who we were in his driveway. Like I think he came out to meet me. Like he was so agitated. He was like a teenage kid. He was in high school, and he goes, I thought this kid was my friend, but he's not my friend." And I'm like, "Whoa!" Like we just started. I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, what's going on, man? Like back up. What's happening?" And he's like, I forget the kid's name. I'll just say like I don't know, Brian or whatever. Brian came into the classroom and he started walking towards me, and then he walked away from me, and went and talked to these other kids, and like the girl he was talking to like has issues with me and doesn't like me, so now I know Brian doesn't like me, he's not my friend. And I was like, homie, that's you are making up a story, dude. Like that's the story you're telling yourself doesn't serve you. It could also be that Brian came in and had questions about the homework, and he started walking towards you and realized immediately that you probably didn't do it, because let's be honest, you probably didn't do it, and so he went and talked to those other kids instead because he knows they do homework and do a good job with it. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe he walked in and halfway to you, he farted and he just wanted to get away from that cloud and didn't want to like drag it over to you and he went over somewhere else instead. You have no idea, right? And I was trying to use examples to make him laugh and make him chuckle, which I did, because it's so upsetting. The story is so upsetting when we tell it to ourselves that if we can stop and try to come up with another one, if we can make it ridiculous, it points out that the other one might be ridiculous too, which is helpful. And it also de-escalates all of that stress and anxiety that we're creating for ourselves with the first one.
And I think to go back to our original point, which was your awesome advice about hosting,
Mm-hmm.
the more I tell myself those stories, the more my confidence shrinks, my
Mm-hmm.
inner critic grows, and I feel bad about myself. And that weight makes it really hard to do stuff. And I've been there. I'm not claiming I didn't used to tell myself these stories because I absolutely did.
Me too. Yeah.
But it doesn't serve you. And also, like you said to the kid, I love that story. It's like, I don't know what's going on for these folks, and I literally am writing like a Hollywood movie script. My stories in my head like could be sold because they would be so elaborate. This is like when I was in middle school, high school, college, and a lot of the time it turned out none of it was true. None of it was true.
And also, like, especially in middle school, right? So, as a former middle school teacher who knows about young adolescents, right? Part of young adolescence is the brain just makes you very self-centered. Part of the development of the brain at that age is you just get very self-centered, right? And so, some of the lessons I would teach my students, which apply to adults too, is when you go to that party and you feel like everyone is looking at you and you're under a spotlight, just know that everyone else at that party feels like everyone is looking at them and that they're in a spotlight. And they're so wrapped up in their own stuff that they're not noticing you. They're not paying attention. Except for like two or three kids. And at least my experience is it's usually girls because girls are more socially engaged than boys, especially at that age. Doesn't have to be. But often there's a handful of girls that have learned that there's power in judging other people and they're aggressively doing that. But most kids aren't, right? And the same is true with adults, where most adults are not doing that, but there's a handful of men and women who have figured out that if they're super judgmental and targeting at people, then like they can get some power from that. But by the time we're adults, like you can undermine that easy because everybody knows that person is a jerk. And you can be like, ah, yeah, I guess I'm not doing it right, and then talk to everybody about it, everyone else about how judgmental that person is, and like counter, sort of like, counter judge, I guess. Um, but also, the less you care, the less power they have. I've had people be like, blah, 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 blah at me, and I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. You're right. I didn't shave today, or whatever it is the thing they're picking on me about, right? Like, yep, that's true. I don't know what to tell you. And the more rejection sensitive we are, the harder it is to go, yep, I don't know what to tell you. Like, yeah, I messed that up. I screwed that up. And if we're super sensitive, then that's not going to ring true. And it's like chum in the water for those particular kinds of bullies, right? And so we got to just go, yeah, I'm sensitive to rejection, but also I can manage that. I can figure out what helps me handle it. And some of that is stop telling yourself that you're sensitive to rejection. That story you're telling yourself matters here too. If I bang my knee and I'm like, oh, my knee hurts so much, oh, my knee hurts so much, oh, my knee hurts so much, and I pay attention to how much my knee hurts, it's going to keep hurting. But if I don't, it's going to get better faster. It might not heal and be structurally good, but it's not going to hurt all the time because I'm not like thinking it always hurts, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. So like same is true with rejection sensitivity. The more we tell ourselves we're sensitive, the more sensitive we're going to become. And that's going to make it harder to engage socially, whether we're hosting or visiting or whatever.
And you and I have talked about this a lot too, so I want to say it here. I also will say too, I've had a lot of trauma therapy. And so sometimes when I talk about, like, I know I did this Understood podcast, I talked about being bullied and I went into it more. And I got comments where people said, well, how could it have been that bad if, you're able to talk about it? And I'm like, well, I've done EMDR, which is a trauma therapy, and I've done a ton of other things. So I don't look at those memories with the same charge that they used to have. And I'm proactive about it. If I uncovered a memory and it was really charged and it was bothering me, I would go back and do the work on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another thing here. Some of how I'm able to have that distance is that I've done a bunch of work, and I can't recommend enough. It takes the charge out of it. It's not looking at things with that same heaviness anymore, and it allows me to say, middle school Caroline, like you're trying to drive this now, but I need you to understand that we're okay. And all that comes together. And I just want to recommend to people, because I know that it's money and it's time and you have to find the right person. But when you do it, it makes that middle school kid less powerful to drive all your adult relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, like, because you're healed, right? Like
Yeah.
and that doesn't mean that there aren't scars and stuff, but you're healed. It's not an open wound anymore. I, I'm sure you've had the same experience where like you come on a podcast, you do a workshop or whatever, and people are like, thank you for being so vulnerable in whatever you said. And invariably, I'm like, I wasn't. Just because I talked about stuff that most people don't talk about doesn't mean any of that made me feel vulnerable. Like I'm healed on all that stuff. I'm stable and stationary and balanced with all of the stuff that I talk about. If I wasn't, I wouldn't talk about it.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. And there's things I also don't talk about because they're not like fit for daily life, right? Like I don't want to trigger people. You're driving in your car, you're doing your thing. I don't want to make you triggered or unhappy. But I think that's the thing. There's some distance from it, and literally when you look at the memory, it's not as painful. And you have like this magical perspective on it. And so
Hmm.
that's a piece of this too, is that then you're able to have that wise self look at the story you're telling yourself and go, that's middle school Brendan. You
Yeah.
know, that's not current Brendan.
Yeah. And all like that stuff matters because I'm having a vision of people who are listening going, what does any of this have to do with inviting people over to your house? And like it applies because we're dealing with all that stuff in the course of trying to invite people over to our house. Like it's all that internal dialogue that's based on past trauma, that's based on the story we're telling ourselves, that makes it harder or easier to do these things, and that makes us overdo stuff or underdo stuff and have trouble finding the right middle ground for inviting people over, right? Like, hey, do you want to come over for a barbecue? And then you've got like no reason. It's not a birthday party or anything. It's just a random Saturday, and you've got like balloons and streamers and a bounce house and crazy amounts of entertainment and decorations, and you're overdoing it because you feel inadequate. And no, if that's something that anyone listening has ever done, like probably all those people came over before they knew there was going to be a bounce house and balloons and streamers and filet mignon or whatever kind of over the top stuff you did. And just remember that, right? Like they didn't come over for the bounce house. They came over to just hang out with you and spend time with you because you're worth spending time with. And that's all.
A therapist once said this to me, and I'll share it because it is germane to like, do you feel confident enough to invite someone over to your house, like for this advice you've given us? And he said that it's like carrying rocks and you're balancing the rocks, but then one more rock comes on and it tips you over.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think all that past stuff and dealing with it and processing it and getting trauma therapy and stuff, the reason that I think it's really important is exactly that. Because otherwise, I'm about to send out a text, and people may come, they may not come. But I'm, instead of just it being a text, I'm carrying all those rocks. And it makes it really hard to do. And so I got to get rid of some of those rocks, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's too much weight to carry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just got to put stuff down. And that's forgiveness, right? That's forgiving ourselves. That's I was talking about this with a client today that like the in her in that their case it was like the adults in your life who did it wrong even as like a 40 something year old person, you can forgive them. You can go, when I was 8 and my teacher screamed at me for whatever reason, I can forgive that teacher for doing it wrong like that. And I can do as much, like, probably she was under stress and pressure of her own as I want, or she just, maybe teaching wasn't the career for her or whatever. But like, you can put them down too. That teacher that yelled at you, that person that did that thing, you can go, all right, cool. Like, I can forgive you. I don't have to like say it was okay. I don't have to like ever spend time with you again, but I can go, I am not mad at you anymore. And also I'm not mad at me for suffering through that without doing whatever it is that I think I should have done at whatever age that I didn't do or did do. Like, we can forgive our past selves, we can forgive the people in our past who did stuff, and it helps us push down those rocks.
Yeah. This is such a good discussion. Okay, so thank you for coming. Thank you for talking. We always have such good discussions. I hope
True.
people will take some things away from this about how to be social and how to put down those rocks. And I just am so glad that we got to do this. Thank you.
Yeah, I love talking, so anytime.